Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, and above me here on the screen, as always, is my co-host, Joe Clark. And before we dive into today's episode, a little housekeeping. Next week, we will not be having an episode, as both of us will be elsewhere. I will be in Mobile, Alabama, covering the Senior Bowl for my third year, and Joe, you will be in Texas. What part of Texas is it? Frisco?
Yeah. So the actual games in Dallas. We're staying in Frisco, but the practices are in Denton. So we're all over the place.
They have you guys commuting this year, which kind of is a little bit different. And this is only the second year in Texas. It was in Vegas for a long time. How many years is this for you at Shrine Bowl altogether?
This is my third of the Shrine Bowl. So they did. This is the second in Dallas. I think they did two or three in Vegas, and before that it was in St. Petersburg. So I don't know what the permanent home is going to be, but the way things are looking, it won't be in Texas again next year.
Well, I don't know about you, but I look forward to this trip every year. This is year three, and living in Nashville, I'm able to just drive down to Mobile. I have a couple of restaurants that I love to hit, so I'm going to be frequenting. I think Roosters is one of my favorites for anybody else that goes down for the Senior Bowl. Excellent Caribbean food of all things down there in Mobile. One of my favorite parts of the year is this trip, and there's a lot of players that we will be talking about. For one of our topics here, we're going to talk about some Steelers-related stuff first, and we'll get to the All-Star Game previews at the end of the show and just kind of preview some of the position groups and players that we're looking forward to watching down there in, for me, Mobile and you, Texas. But first, we're going to start with the lack of changes in Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin basically said outright, when there's this kind of disappointment, you can expect changes. And he said, I expect changes at all levels, I think was the exact quote. And here we are over a week later. It's Tuesday. He said that on, was the wrap-up press conference on Monday last week, I
It
think.
was Tuesday. It was last Tuesday, so it's been a week since he said that, and still nothing.
Still nothing. And so, yeah, I mean, Joe, where is a change going to happen? I mean, at this point, my kind of thought is, they send a lot of scouts, a lot of front office personnel, a lot of coaches to things like the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl. If you're going to make those changes, this is kind of the first step in the process of scouting, some of those next guys. Do you think is a change coming here in the next few days, I guess is what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't feel that way at all. And I would go with no if I had to, guess right now, just given the fact that it's been over a week since Tomlin said anything about it. And there's been a lot of reporting that's gone both ways about maybe it'll just be guys who it's just something with their contract, and both Terrell Austin and he's under contract, Pat Myers under contract. Those are the two that were widely speculated about. It just doesn't feel like anybody's going anywhere, which um, I don't really know how you can roll into next season without changing the coaching staff at all. I mean, maybe there'll be additions made. They still traditionally have one of the smallest coaching staffs in the league, but the fact that nothing's been done so far is certainly baffling. And if that's the path that they continue to go down and just stick with the status quo, I'm just not really sure what their plan's going to be, unless they really feel as if it was more of a personnel player on the field issue than a coaching issue. But when you lose 5 games in a row, I feel like it's got to be a little bit of both in some capacity. And the coaching staff hasn't changed at all. So we'll be interesting to see what happens there. But, in the next few days, I'd be really surprised if something did happen, given that nothing has now, a week and 2 days since the season ended.
Yeah, it's like the least climactic thing. I mean, the Steelers had this probably it's probably the lowest I've personally been on the team from what I can remember growing up. I mean, I've probably been following the team since I was, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old. And this is the lowest. When they lost that game, it's kind of the lowest I ever was on the team. And so, you kind of naturally just expect some changes, and none are coming. I think, you kind of take the good with the bad, or the bad with the good in this case. The Steelers, a lot of people tend to praise them for their stability, and I think, if you go back before kind of this stretch of Mike Tomlin just barely getting, winning seasons and certainly not winning in the playoffs, people were still praising the Steelers for their kind of continuity and their stability back then. And back then it was like, oh, wow, this is such a good model. So I think you do have to take the bad with the good. And, unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, this is what the Steelers do. I mean, just today, Jim Rooney, what podcast was he on? Was it?
It was Ross Tucker.
Yeah, Ross Tucker podcast, and basically said, trading Mike Tomlin was never realistic. They don't view the losing as a Tomlin issue. They view it as an organizational issue, kind of like everybody involved wasn't good enough. Certainly Tomlin shares in that, but they're not just pinning this on Tomlin. And he cited, we're not going to get into the mechanical, I forget exactly what he said, but essentially I think what he meant was we're not going to bail on Tomlin's $50 million contract that they're going to have to pay him either way. What Dulac, I think, said it was $50 million. I think there was also that Forbes or one of those kind of articles that said his pay was up there at $50 million. So all that said, I agree. I don't think we're going to see a ton of changes. I think I said last week I would love to see the offensive line coach change. I think that could be the single most impactful change they could make, short of obviously changing coordinators or changing head coach. I think that the single biggest change that they could make is an offensive line coach. Those guys kind of act as the run game coordinator. I think that they could attract a high-level talent at offensive line coach with the situation they have with Arthur Smith, the situation they have with all the talent along the offensive line. But I don't think I think it would have happened by now. So I don't really know what to make of that. But I think Brooke Pryor, ESPN's Brooke Pryor, hinted that Carl Dunbar might be a free agent. She seemed kind of less than 100% sure the way she phrased it. But do you think he's a candidate to go? I mean, I've always kind of viewed him as a strong point on the coaching staff, but are they just going to basically clean house of anybody whose contract is up and call that change?
Yeah, I don't really understand how moving on from Dunbar would really be the change that they make, if that's the case, given the fact that, Cameron Hayward was an all-pro at 35 years old, had one of his best seasons. You saw a little bit of growth from Keanu Benton. And then there really just wasn't a ton of other talent for him to work with if you're looking specifically at that defensive line group. So I would be very surprised if Dunbar was the guy that they moved on from. He seems to be a guy that's well liked in that room, and he did a good job this year. So there's definitely other changes I'd make ahead of it, and that would kind of just seem to be making a change for the sake of making a change. But then again, Steelers did allow 299 rushing yards. That does start up front, and 299 against the Ravens in the playoff loss. So I don't know, but that kind of feels like a scapegoat sort of move if they do get rid of Dunbar, just because of what happened there. Because overall, I mean, I think he's done a good job with the defensive line room. So I don't know. It would be a surprise to me, but I guess anything is possible.
Yeah, and he works with the outside linebackers too some, and so that would be, you wouldn't think that they would, if Watt and Highsmith like him, you wouldn't think they would make that change, and it does appear that they like him, but who knows at this point. At least one change is going to happen. I don't know what it's going to be or when it's going to be, but they can't just run it back with 100% the same scouting staff, coaching staff, everything. That would be shocking, especially after what Mike Tomlin said. I guess Grady Brown could end up getting hired by the Falcons. Did they make their hire yet?
They hired Jeff Ulbrich this weekend.
Oh, well, so Brown will probably be sticking around. There's no change there. Arthur Smith, I guess there's still a small chance that he could go to the Jets, although it seems like they're targeting Aaron Glenn. If he were to get scooped up by the Jets, then there could be some significant changes. I would think, a new offensive coordinator wouldn't want all of the same old coaching staff. They'd probably, install a couple of their own guys. So that is kind of the path to the largest amount of change that you could see, but I don't see it happening at this point. Even if the Jets offer Arthur Smith the job, I'm not 100% convinced he would take it, just given what he said about, he wouldn't just jump at any head coach opportunity. Certainly a guy like him, if he gets fired from another head coaching job, which the Jets, I mean, not the best situation over there, no quarterback. And, they just fired their coach mid-season. It's not a great situation for him to kind of revamp himself as a head coach, but still, I guess, remains at least a small possibility. And I think it was Connor Orr at Sports Illustrated said that he kind of thinks Smith is the plan B over there in New York. So I guess there is a possibility. I think that's kind of everything on the no changes front. It's kind of just a waiting game at this point, and I think most people are going to be kind of, I guess, disappointed is the word that most people would probably use at how much change there ends up being in the end. Moving forward to the quarterback, this is kind of the other thing that can change. I guess when Tomlin was talking about change, he didn't necessarily mean the coaching staff. It could be the personnel as well. And so I think quarterback is the most obvious thing. I think a week ago I said that I did think Russell Wilson would ultimately be brought back. My thinking's kind of changed a little bit. Just, I guess now that we're a week further in the process and I've had more time to kind of look over things and process what everything looked like last year, I'm still open to Wilson returning, and I think there still is a possibility of that. But Fields does seem like the better option. Joe, has your thinking at all changed? I think you were more kind of leaning Fields. Is there a free agent you have your eye on or anything like that?
No, I'm still leaning Fields. What I found interesting, just given a lot of the reporting that came out this week, is I know it was Jerry Dulac. He said that Fields' contract won't be anything crazy. Like, okay, kind of look at that, like whatever. I don't know. I'm still thinking somewhere, 15 to $20 million range. But PFF released their top 75 free agent list today, and they had contract projections. And Fields' contract projection was only 1 year, 11 million, fully guaranteed. Compared to Wilson was 2 years, 70 million with 40 million guaranteed. And then if you go down, Sam Darnold was the number one rated free agent quarterback. His was 3 years, 123.75 million with 70 million guaranteed. And I mean, frankly, if you're gonna any of those three, I think Fields 1 year, 11 million fully guaranteed is a lot more palatable than either of those other two options. And I think he probably gives you just as good of a chance to win. And younger, he's even if you're still viewing him strictly as a bridge quarterback, there's still more upside there than you're gonna get with Wilson or probably even Darnold at this point, how he kind of struggled down the stretch. So I'm still very much in the camp that I think they should bring back Fields and just see what they can do with him for a year or two, and then kind of, reassess. He still gives you flexibility. You're not going to be paying him a ton of money to go dip your toes in, maybe the rookie quarterback pool if you get to that point, or figure it out from there. But I think that's probably the best option going forward, because I don't really think anybody, unless they get Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow, I don't think the Steelers are winning the Super Bowl with the available quarterback talent that there is at their disposal. So I'm in favor of rolling with a younger guy. I mean, Fields looked good when he started earlier this season, and just see what you can get out of him, and kind of evaluate as you go, and keep all options open.
I agree with your logic, but will the Steelers agree is ultimately what matters. And they've always, Mike Tomlin has said outright that he's always looking to win now. He said his current group works too hard to have an eye on the future. And so, Omar Khan, guys like that probably have an eye on the future more, but we know Mike Tomlin has his hands in the decision-making process. And so if he thinks, hey, you know what, we are actually closer than everybody thinks we are, do they just decide, well, Russell Wilson wasn't fully supported, or does, Fields end up getting another offer somewhere that kind of drives that price up? Or does Russell Wilson, agree to take some kind of sweetheart deal to stay? Because, let's face it, he's probably not going to get a starting opportunity elsewhere, at least not with a team that's probably better than the Steelers are right now. So it's going to have to play out. One thing that was interesting to me is Jeremy Fowler of ESPN said today that a high-level, I think it was a scouting director for another NFL team, an anonymous one, said that he expects the Steelers to take a quarterback fairly high in this upcoming draft, and said could go either way on Fields or Russell Wilson, but said regardless of how it goes with Fields and Wilson, they do expect the Steelers to target a quarterback. Joe, do you think that they have to start kind of taking shots in the dark at the quarterback position, even in what is kind of deemed a weak class? Or do you think, start to kind of point point the ship towards 2026 and kind of taking one then? I mean, should they just do both drafts? Should they do it every draft until they find one? What do you think they should do?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily in favor of taking a quarterback just to take a quarterback and hoping he develops. But if there's somebody there on their third or fourth that they have, even like a high backup grade on, then yeah, I would take somebody. I mean, they only have Skylar Thompson under contract for next year, so I mean, yeah, they could go out and sign three quarterbacks, but it wouldn't be bad to have a third rookie developmental guy out there. And it is a weak quarterback class, but again, I mean, you could do it this year, you could do it next year. There's nothing really stopping you if the guy you take this year isn't he doesn't develop the way you want him to, and then you take another guy the year after, even if they're both backups. I mean, I'm not advocating for them to take a quarterback in the first round. I don't think they should. Uh, Even like they're not going to trade up, but there's not going to be anybody there for them to take at 21. But the third or fourth round, if there's somebody who's kicking around that they have a decent enough grade on, I'm all for it. I mean, at this point, you kind of have to. They haven't taken a quarterback since what they took. They never drafted anybody since the Pickett Latticune year with 2022, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, you're now going on three. This will be the third draft, two drafts without a quarterback. So, it's getting on that time where probably should consider taking one.
Yeah, and I think I talked about this a little bit last week, but Tomlin did say, he doesn't view franchise quarterbacks being exclusive to the top round of the draft. If you go back to even 2018 when they selected Mason Rudolph in what was it, the third round, I think. He was Kevin Colbert said that they had a first round grade on Mason Rudolph, and so there's guys that aren't kind of consensus first rounders that a team like the Steelers might have a first round grade on. That happens, I would think, way more often than we think. With players that kind of fall down the draft board that might be, super high up for somebody, but might just not be at the position that they need or whatever it might be, which is kind of what the case was for Mason Rudolph, and they had Ben Roethlisberger. But in the third round, it was too hard to, pass up on that opportunity. Now, were they correct on Mason Rudolph being a first round talent? I would say no. I think there's some in Pittsburgh who think he should probably still be the quarterback of the team and would disagree with me, but that's neither here nor there. All that to say, I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with. I mean, there are obvious examples. There's Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, like Mike Tomlin cited, but for every one of those, there's 10 or 15 that don't work out, that are drafted outside of the kind of top bit of the first round. And I mean, even at the top bit of the first round, there's quarterbacks that don't work out. I mean, Lamar Jackson's year, you have Mayfield, Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, and Lamar Jackson. So I guess now that Darnold's playing well, 4 of 5 of those hit. That was a strong quarterback class, and that's kind of why you see somebody like Jackson further down the draft board. And for Hurts' year, you had Burrow, Tua, Herbert, Love, and Hurts. And so that's kind of why you see him down there at, I think, 53 overall in that draft class. And this is not viewed as a strong draft class. So I don't think there's going to be like bargain bin kind of, diamonds in the rough at the end of the first round or in the second or third round. They do happen. Obviously, there's your Brock Purdy's, there's your Dak Prescott's, there's guys like that you can find. But Joe, do you think that this is a year that they might, if there is a guy in the first round like a Shedeur Sanders or a Cam Ward or a I don't know, Will Howard, whoever it might be, do you think this is a year that they could entertain trading up, or do you think that's out of the question?
I'd be surprised just because the price to move up from 21 into the top 3, top 5 is going to be incredibly high. And the Steelers have a ton of other, they're going to have to replenish their defensive line with Cameron Hayward getting older and the group kind of generally not having a ton of depth to it. They have to rebuild their secondary. There's a ton of other needs, like giving up draft capital now and in the future is going to hurt them. I mean, if there's a way to, I don't know, if a team really, really likes, it's not going to happen, but if a team, really likes George Pickens or they can go first round pick and they're 2 firsts but like unless they can get a sweetheart deal out of it, I just don't think the price is going to be worth it. And I don't think they're going to view the price to be worth it to move up into the top 5 from where they're at. I mean, if they're drafting at 10 or 12, maybe then it's a little bit more palatable. But given where they are, moving up into that spot to get an elite quarterback is just going to be too costly. And I think at that point, you just kind of kick the can down the line another year and see what you can do and bring back somebody that they like it well enough in 2025.
Is there a quarterback this year that you would, in an ideal world, like, say 2022, Kenny Pickett was the only quarterback taken At pick 20, the Steelers basically had their pick of the litter and took Pickett. Um, is there a quarterback that, do you like Sanders? Do you like Ward? Have you watched any of them enough to kind of have a strong opinion one way or the other?
Yeah, I mean Sanders, I've seen. I mean, I've seen a decent amount, and he's going to be at the Shrine Bowl too. I just think the media circus that will come with him is kind of, for the Steelers organization, that might not be something they want. Obviously, you have the Dion, you have he's what the Josiah Newsom's favorite term is an athlete influencer. So there's going to be a ton of media attention on him. Right off the bat. I mean, as there is for pretty much every other quarterback, and I do like Cam Ward. I like Cam Ward at Washington State a lot. But I don't think I like either of them well enough to give up the draft capital that it would take to acquire them. I don't think either of them is gonna come in and immediately, be a Jaden Daniels, I guess, to use an example from this year, who really, and I mean, I don't think a lot of people, I didn't think Jaden Daniels is going to be Jaden Daniels either. So, hey, I'll happily be proven wrong if one of these guys becomes really good, because then good for them. But I just don't think that either of them are going to be worth what it would take the Steelers to give up to get them. It just overall, it's not a great quarterback class. And so I would think the Steelers probably have their eyes on if they're going to go for a younger quarterback, probably somewhere down the line, or bring back Fields.
Is there a kind of mid round, or like not mid round, but after that kind of first tier of Ward and Sanders, who is there a quarterback that you're kind of like, oh, that might be interesting in the second or third round?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, after the college football platform, it's hard not to like Will Howard. I mean, the throw last night he had on 3rd and 4 to Jeremiah Smith was super impressive. And you look at the weapons that he has too, so that kind of helps things out a little bit. I mean, you have Smith, you have Ibuka, Cardinal Tate played really well for them this season, so he has a ton of guys who are some of the best receivers in college football. So that's something you kind of got to take it when you see him at these bowls. I think he is going to the Senior Bowl, so you see in the pre-draft process, kind of evaluate how he looks in comparison to the other quarterbacks there. But he is the guy that right now probably intrigues me the most as a potential option. But he's climbing up. I wouldn't be surprised if he's off the board in the first 75 picks of the draft, which didn't seem to be the case a few weeks ago. He really struggled against Michigan, but of that second crop of guys, he's the one who right now I think it's hard not to be intrigued by him, given that he's won a national championship.
Yeah, and I think I guess we'll just segue right into our third topic of previewing the All Star games. The Senior Bowl has a lot of quarterback talent that I'm excited to watch. I don't know what it's going to look like, but there is some intrigue there. You're going to have both of the national championship quarterbacks present, as long as their bodies are feeling okay. That's a tight turnaround for them, so I'm hoping they show up. But I am excited to watch Howard and Leonard, and I think one that's intriguing to me that I know a lot of people, it's probably flying under most people's radar, but Dylan Gabriel from Oregon is kind of interesting. He's undersized. He's only 6 feet tall and 200 pounds. He's a small guy for quarterback, but he is the all-time NCAA touchdown leader. So he has 188 career touchdowns, responsible for 188. So I think he had 155 passing and 33 rushing or something like that. So he's, if what have the Steelers been lacking over the last several years is creating touchdowns, and nobody has ever been better at creating touchdowns than Dylan Gabriel in college football. So somebody that's interesting. I know Mike Tomlin always talks about mobility, and Gabriel has some of that. I think actually almost all of these guys have mobility. There's very few like true pocket passers. I mean, you could look at a guy like a Jackson Dart, but even he has mobility. He's more of a gunslinger. He's more of a pocket passer than the rest of these guys, but even he has kind of sneaky mobility there. So it should be an interesting class of quarterbacks to look at there. Jalen Milroe, maybe. I mean, obviously he didn't have the greatest time at Alabama overall. He was benched at one point last year by Saban. Obviously this year, Alabama, big disappointment. But he has that mobility. I think he won the academic Heisman, so he's a smart kid. He's well regarded in terms of being a teammate and stuff. So he has some of the hearts and smarts that the Steelers like. He's got that mobility, obviously, and so maybe something there. I don't know, but I am excited to watch that group. We'll just go back and forth. Joe, what's one group that you're looking forward to watching, and some players as well?
Yeah, so Maybe not some watching, some kind of talking to. So the DB group this year is really loaded. Shavon Reveille tore his ACL earlier this season, so he's probably not going to be playing at the Shrine Bowl. But he's somebody I'm excited to talk to. He's a potential first round pick. He's been mocked to the Steelers a few times. Jordan Clark is the son of Ryan Clark. Played at Notre Dame. He got hurt in the game last night, so again, his availability in terms of actually playing, not really sure. And that again with a long season, given that their season just ended on Monday, sometimes those guys don't really practice as much. But two quarterbacks who most likely will play are, excuse me, Zion Alexander from LSU. He's a guy at 4 interceptions the last 2 years. He transferred, I believe, from the JUCO level, and he came up and has played really well. 11 passes defensed, and somebody who's just kind of stood out on tape of the few LSU games I've watched. And then Kobe Bryant will be the second Kobe Bryant quarterback in the NFL. Or I guess the Seahawks Kobe Bryant moved to free safety, but another Kobe Bryant. He's his number. When I was going through the Shrine Bowl sheet, he's somebody whose numbers really stood out to me. Just raw stats. He had 22 passes defense, 13 career collegiate interceptions. So I watched him a little bit with what I could find. He played really well against Colorado earlier this season. So the defensive back group is definitely one that I'm excited to see, especially because the Steelers are probably going to be looking for cornerback help. At some point in the middle rounds. Bryant's probably, a day two selection. Alexander maybe a little bit later. He's probably like an early day three pick, but two guys that really stood out. And then obviously Revel. Hopefully we'll get the chance to talk to him. Usually we can talk to mostly everybody we want, but this year there's a lot more high profile talent at the Shrine Bowl than there usually is. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, the DB room for sure is one that'll be fun to watch, especially in those 1v1s.
Yeah, and I've only had a chance to preview 3 of the position groups so far. I've looked at defensive line, quarterback, and running back. I'll be looking at wide receivers and corners over the next couple of days leading up to the event. I might take a glance at tight ends and offensive linemen. That's my favorite group to watch always, so I'll probably look at them. But I don't know how much the Steelers are going to be interested in. Maybe a guard. But running backs, there's some interesting names at the Senior Bowl. Obviously, Cam Scatabo from Arizona State's going to be a popular name. I think he probably might be a little. He's kind of a strange player to me, just because I think people regard him very highly, and he did a really good job at Arizona State. Certainly, he was great in that playoff game against Texas, but he doesn't. He lacks some kind of traits that would make him, maybe a superstar kind of running back. I think the right team, like if he got on like the 49ers or something like that, I think he would be like, a great kind of gadget or a change of pace kind of player for them. I don't know what his fit would be in Pittsburgh. They haven't really used. I don't know. Maybe. Scatabo's an interesting one, but Jerry Dulac has recently been talking about. Of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, that is. He's been talking about the Steelers needing a running back that can get to the edge. And there's a couple of those guys in Mobile this year. I think R.J. Harvey from UCF is a guy that kind of fits that description. There is, Bajal Tootin. He had 2 kick return touchdowns in college. He kind of fits that description. Brashard Smith is a home run hitter from SMU. He can kind of fit that description. So there's a few options that I'll be looking at that can kind of be that more change of pace, third down, get the edge, hit a home run kind of running back. The real premier kind of guys like that, like your Jahmyr Gibbs and your Jonathan Taylor, those guys tend to kind of go really very high in the draft. I think a couple years ago, Gibbs was projected to go in the second or second-ish round, and he went in the first. And so it's going to be expensive to get one of those kinds of guys, but I think there are also some all-around backs that could be interesting in Mobile. I think Ollie Gordon, he was the guy I did my first draft profile on this year. He's very interesting to me. He was I think he had like almost 1,700 rushing yards in 2023 with Oklahoma State. He kind of fell off in 2024. That team was just bad this past year. Oklahoma State was just downright awful, and I think that kind of dragged Gordon down a bit. Now, you can't just say it was all on the team. Some of that's kind of his own, luggage to carry there. The fact that he had such a big drop off in 2024, but he is an interesting one. He has soft hands. I think he's kind of faster than most people probably give him credit for. I'm very excited to see what his 40 time ends up being later in this process if he runs it. Um, yeah, I think Ollie Gordon is kind of a prototypical Steelers back. He does a little bit of everything. He's 6'2", 225 pounds. If you can get him in like the third round or something, which is where I think I graded him out, then I would be very down for that. Now, I think he did have some kind of character thing, some kind of DUI arrest last June. So, whether that knocks him off people's boards, I don't know much about him, obviously. I hope to get to talk to him in Mobile and learn, what kind of player he is. I think when he got injured this past year, people were asking if he was going to opt out because at one point he was viewed as a front runner for, the Heisman in 2024. He received a few Heisman votes in 2023. People kind of viewed him as the front runner entering 2024. He ended up getting hurt a little bit. Nothing major, but I think people were asking, like, are you going to opt out of this season to protect your draft stock? And he's like, no, I finish what I start. So I did see that. He seems to be a team player in that regard. And so I look forward to talking to him, and I think he's somebody I definitely have circled on my list. Joe, what's another position group and some names, a name or two that you're going to be looking?
Yeah, no, I mean, wide receiver, probably the Steelers, besides quarterback, biggest need heading into this offseason. So there's a couple of wide receivers I'm really excited to watch. Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. He could sneak into the back half of the first round. Probably more of a day two pick, but he's somebody I really want to see. I believe Jonathan had a mock to the Steelers in his most recent mock draft as their second round pick, and he kind of does a little bit of everything that the Steelers look for. Another name was probably projected, he was probably going to go later in the draft, but Ja'Cory Brooks. He got, I mean, after his sophomore year at Alabama, he was being talked up as a potential first round wide receiver. But kind of fell off last year and transferred to Louisville, where he put up 1,000-yard season, returned some punts for them too. So, speedy guy, skill set that is intriguing, and obviously had the early success in the SEC. Steelers are big on pedigree, and getting it done early at a high level, and kind of bouncing back last season. He's somebody I wouldn't be surprised is on their radar. Jimmy Horn and Will Shepherd both had success before Shadur Sanders as their quarterback and with Shadur Sanders as their quarterback. Horn was at South Florida before transferring to Colorado. Shepherd was at Vandy. And both guys, I think, have a skill set that can work in the NFL. And then another one, Jacoby George. He was a little bit overshadowed by Xavier Restrepo at Miami, but he's somebody that whenever I had a Miami game on, he seemed to be making some plays. And I know preseason he was, pretty well thought of, and from what I've seen of him, he's a guy that I really like as, a potential day three pick. Maybe good week, he'll work his way up higher, but and then Nick Nash out of San Jose State put up some crazy numbers, but a lot of it was against FCS competition. So excited to see what he can do going up against other, guys who are considered to be draft worthy, and see if he can kind of replicate some of what he did in college against other solid talent and solidify his draft stock. So a couple names there that are intriguing. I mean, there's always a few receivers that come out that I have my eye on leading up to the draft, and I would figure this year will be no different.
Quite a few more like first round type guys at the Shrine Bowl than most
Yeah,
years.
there's like four guys this year that go in the first. There's Shadur, there's Kenneth Grant, there's Revel, there's Trey Harris. So four, and I wouldn't be surprised. Antoine Powell Ryland was a lot of fun to watch at Virginia Tech, kind of off the edge as a defensive end, outside linebacker type guy, and I think he's somebody that if he plays really well, he's a little bit older, which is the problem, but if he plays well, he's one of those that build that usually sometimes can go sneak into the late first. So four, maybe five first round picks this year, which is, I mean, Zay Flowers is the only first round pick who's ever gone to the Shrine Bowl in recent years. So definitely a change of pace this year in terms of the top end talent.
And real quick to wrap it up here, just talk about defensive linemen at the Senior Bowl. I think there's a ton of guys that could be very intriguing to the Steelers. Just based on the measurements alone, there's way more guys that fit the Steelers' typical mold for what they look for in a defensive end than there were last year. I mean, last year we're talking about pretty much just like, I mean, at the Senior Bowl, like Darius Robinson was like the guy we were talking about last year, and he kind of ended up being more of like an edge player. He was a little too thin and a little too tall. His build wasn't, I mean, he had the length, but he just didn't have kind of like the the necessary anchor to kind of play end in a 3-4 system. And there's a lot of guys that are kind of similar to your Darius Robinson from last year in that they have the length. I just need to see what that official weight comes in at. There's guys like I don't know, Jared Ivey, 6'6", 285 pounds. There's a Landon Jackson, 6'7", 280. I mean, if you're 6'6" or 6'7", you'd like to see at least probably 290, 295 to be able to hold up there on the end. Guys like Nick Scourton at Texas A&M, 6'4", 280. I mean, there's guys that just, like, if they show up 5 or 10 pounds heavier than what their college website listed them at, which happens all the time. The college websites sometimes just get added when they join the team and never updated. So there's a chance these guys, have filled out since then. But pay very close attention when those Senior Bowl measurements come out, which ones of these kind of defensive ends, and I posted a primer today of kind of the ones to watch. If you look at that list and kind of look when the measurements come out, which should be this upcoming Monday, keep an eye on which of these guys show up 5 to 10 pounds heavier, and they are going to be prime candidates for the Steelers at defensive end. I think Shamar Stewart, Texas A&M, TJ Sanders, South Carolina. There's all kinds of guys that kind of fit what I was just talking about. So all that to say, there are tons and tons of good defensive linemen in this year's draft. It's just a matter of finding who's going to work for the Steelers system, and I think that's going to be high up on their list of priorities. Cam Hayward can't play forever. Ogunjobi's probably gone, if I had to guess. And then, they're pretty much in dire need of somebody opposite of Hayward this year as well as for the future. And so, don't be surprised if they sign somebody, but as we saw with Ogunjobi, that's expensive. Don't be surprised if they draft 1 or 2 and, you're hoping somebody like Logan Lee develops. Are you hoping DeMarvin Leal? I mean, you're running it back there. I guess you might have to. So should be an interesting year for defensive linemen, all that to say. Joe, is there anything else there previewing the Shrine Bowl before we go?
No, just excited to be there, excited to provide coverage. It should be a good time. I'm sure it will be the same for you in Mobile.
Yeah, we got myself, Jonathan Heitritter, and Ephraim Geller in Mobile, and then Joe, it's what, you, Josh, Dr. Melanie,
Dr. Mel, and then Troy, Montgomery, and Stephen Pavelka will be down in Dallas.
So a big squad in Dallas, a decent squad. I think we had 2 last year, so we're up to 3 this year in Mobile, and we'll be doing what we always do, just posting, daily interviews with players. We'll be posting our daily diaries from on site, just kind of recapping the day's events and what we saw from who might end up being some future Steelers. Last year, the Steelers drafted Peyton Wilson and Roman Wilson out of the Senior Bowl. Did they draft any Shrine guys last year? Logan Lee?
They drafted Logan Lee, Mason McCormick. They signed Beanie Bishop.
Was Ryan Watts?
Undrafted free agent, and Ryan Watts. So yeah. 4 guys who played at the Shrine Bowl last year ended up being Steelers.
The majority of the draft class was either Senior Bowl or Shrine Bowl. All that to say, follow us on Twitter. I am at Ross_McCorkle. Joe, I always forget. At Joe Clark 1233.
It's just Jay Clark 1233.
Okay, I was close.
Yes, right there.
I'll get it next episode. But follow us. Keep up with us on Twitter. We'll be posting on the website. We won't have an episode of this next week, but we will be talking all about our experience at the All-Star Games the following week when we get back. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you have a question, 412-254-3145. Give us a call or a text, and we will answer that our next episode, which again will be in 2 weeks. Thank you guys, and see you next time.